So I want to talk about where we can find some guidance on the Machinery Directive. So there's a guidance document which is really helpful, and also getting into there, just showing some uses for it. So talking about what the definitions are of machinery, what qualifies as machinery, what isn't machinery, and how the guide's actually going to help you with that. So if we head into Google, or in this case Bing, and we search Machinery Directive Guide, we're going to go to the EU Commission's website. We're going to scroll down. So this is the page for the Machinery Directive. If we keep going down, we've got a couple of guidance documents. And this one here is particularly helpful. So I think it's about 400 pages long. I've actually already got it open. So let's just flick to a different screen. So yeah, 465 pages. And I've just scrolled down. So this here is Article 1, and this is some of the definitions. So this is a list of what the directive applies to. We've got machinery, interchangeable equipment, safety components, lifting accessories, and other pieces. So part of the question here is, what are some of these things? So what actually is machinery? We're talking about legislation here, so it's very specific. It's going to be very prescriptive in terms of what it defines as machinery. How is that different from interchangeable equipment? What is a safety component? How do lifting accessories come into there, and how do you define those? So you'll find that information in here. So if we scroll down, the sections in red are like for like, taken from the directive, and then the sections that are in black further down. So this is the commentary from the guide based on what these things are. So we're going to talk about a little bit what is machinery, but also what is partly completed machinery as well. So the directive applies to interchangeable machinery. You've got a bit of a description of what that is. Safety components, lifting accessories, including chains, ropes, and webbing. So it's not just machinery that we're talking about in here. But if we were to find definitions and expand on those, this is the document that you want to seek out, you want to look for. So we'll scroll down a bit further. So here we've got this first indent, and this is taken from the Machinery Directive. So this is stating that machinery means an assembly fitted with or intended to be fitted with a drive system other than directly applied human or animal effort, consisting of linked parts or components, at least one of which moves and which are joined together for a specific application. So there are 5 indents here, giving us an idea of what, or unpacking what machinery is, how it's defined, and the guide gives you a bit more information. So an assembly consisting of linked parts or components. So this is telling you also that products with parts or components that are not linked together in an assembly are not considered as machinery. So in that case, the Machinery Directive wouldn't apply. Okay, what have we got further down? So at least one part of which moves. So products without moving parts are not considered as machinery. If you're talking about electrical equipment with no moving parts, then you want to be looking at the Low Voltage Directive, not the Machinery Directive. And then it gives you kind of some other information in here as well. So if you've got a piece of machinery that is intended to be fitted with a drive system, so it has not yet been fitted with a drive system, it is also classed as machinery. And there's a little blurb kind of unpacking that a little bit. So why might you have that? So usually the manufacturer of complete machinery supplies the machinery fitted with its drive system. Yeah. However, machines intended to be fitted with a drive system but supplied without it may also be considered as machinery. So this provision takes account, for example, of the fact that certain users of machinery prefer to have homogeneous stock of motors for their machines in order to facilitate maintenance. So makes total sense. So another item within the description is excluding things that use directly applied or animal effort. Machinery driven by directly a human applied or animal effort, such as, for example, hand-driven lawnmowers, hand drills, or hand-push trolleys, which cease to operate as soon as the manual effort is no longer applied, are not subject to the Machinery Directive. Okay, That's an interesting definition that helps work out whether our piece of equipment is applicable or not, whether the Machinery Directive applies. However, it is also stating here that lifting machinery is the only exemption to this general rule. So lifting machinery is classed as machinery, but other than that, anything that is only moved by direct applied human or animal effort is not classed as machinery. We've got another comment down here. So on the other hand, the Machinery Directive is applicable to machinery driven by manual effort, which is not applied directly. So this is interesting, but stored, for example, in springs or in hydraulic or pneumatic accumulators, so that the machinery can function after the manual effort has ceased. Okay, so we actually have an example here of machinery which the energy is supplied by human effort, but it's stored and it is delayed. And because it's delayed in the likes of a spring or a hydraulic accumulator, it is actually classed as machinery. Okay, so there's a bit of a nuance there. So if we have a look then at the second indent, so this is another, this is continuing on from the description, the definition within the Machinery Directive. So machinery means an assembly referred to in the first indent. So we've looked at that, missing only the components to connect it to, or connect it on site or to sources of energy or motion. So the second indent of the definition of machinery recognizes that the characteristics of the components needed to connect a machine on site to the sources of energy and motion may depend on the site where the machinery is to be used or installed. Okay, makes total sense. So you're supplying a machine, it doesn't have an air supply and it needs one. Well, it's still a machine it's still a machine, and then you install it on site and it gets access to the energy supply that it needs. Okay, makes sense. Third indent, so machinery means an assembly referred to in the first and second indents, which we've looked at, ready to be installed and able to function as it stands only if mounted on a means of transport or installed in a building or a structure. So the third indent of the definition of machinery refers to machinery intended for installation on a means of transport or in a building or in a structure. So if we've got a piece of machinery that's going to be put on the back of a truck and it can operate in and of itself, it is able to fulfill a function, then that is a piece of machinery, irrespective of where it's going to be installed. So on a piece of transport, in a building or in a structure. The fourth indent, so what does machinery mean? It's an assembly or assemblies of machinery referred to in the first, second and third indents, or partially completed referred to in point G, which we'll get onto, which in order to achieve the same end are arranged and controlled so that they function as an integral whole. So the fourth indent deals with assemblies of machinery consisting of two or more machines of partly complete or partly completed machines assembled together for a specific application. So again, this is a complete machine, it's a functioning whole, it's meeting or has to meet all the requirements of Annex 1, the essential health and safety requirements of the Machinery Directive. But this gets us on to another point. What is this partly completed machine? What is partly completed machinery? So if we scroll down, we can go down to, I believe it's page 47, and that will expand what is partly complete machinery. So here we go. So partly complete machinery. So this is a bit of a grey area, or maybe not a grey area, but this is outlining something that partly falls under the Machinery Directive, but because it's not completely functional, because it's not possible for it to meet all of the essential health and safety requirements in Annex 1 of the directive, we have to deal with it a little bit differently. There has to be another approach taken. So what is partly completed machinery? So partly completed machinery means an assembly which is almost machinery, but which cannot in itself perform a specific application. A drive system is partly completed machinery. Partly completed machinery is only intended to be incorporated into or assembled with other machinery or other partly completed machinery or equipment, thereby forming machinery to which this directive applies. So let's unpack that a little bit more. There's quite a few notes within the guidance document that help us understand that. So it should be noted that partly completed machinery is not among the products designated by the term machinery. Further up, we were looking at equipment which didn't have things like a motor or didn't have certain power source. Now, that is we've just read that is qualified as complete machinery. It does get CE marked. We're not talking about this here. We're talking about something a little bit different. So the placing on the market of partly complete machinery is subject to a specific procedure. So this is the slightly different approach. So when we're looking at partly complete machinery, we do not CE mark it. We don't place a CE mark on it. What we do is we produce what is called a Declaration of Incorporation. So just down here, incorporation. So we place a Declaration of Incorporation with the machinery, and that outlines what are the essential health and safety requirements that the machinery complies with. And that is used by the integrator to understand, okay, these are the aspects that it covers in terms of its health and safety requirements. What are the aspects that it doesn't cover that I need to take consideration of when I integrate it into a larger machine, when I CE mark my complete assembly, when I'm going to put it into use or when I'm going to place it on the market. So this is an assembly which is almost machinery, meaning that partly completed machinery is a product that is similar to machinery, but which lacks some elements necessary to perform its specific application. So it's not a functional whole. So as an example, industrial robots are usually designed without a specific application until incorporated into the final machine. You can buy an industrial robot on its own. But it's not functional, it's not performing a particular operation. You have to think about the end effector, where it's installed, what it's going to interact with, interfaces. The manufacturer of the final machinery takes the necessary measures so that the robot can perform its specific application safely with the assembly or within the assembly. In practice, only an industrial stand and function alone robot provided with both an end effector and a control system so that it can itself perform a specific application is complete machinery under the Machinery Directive. This further construction is not the fitting of a drive system, so we touched on that earlier, to the machinery supplied without a drive system, where the drive system is to be fitted is covered by the manufacturer's conformity assessment or the connection to the site with sources of energy or motion. Partly completed machinery should also be distinguished from machinery ready to be installed on a means of transport or in a building or structure. So that gives you a bit of an idea, the difference between what do we CE mark, what is a complete machinery, what needs to or does meet all the requirements of Annex 1, the essential health and safety requirements, what is partly complete machinery, so machinery that may be designed to integrate with another piece of machinery, machinery that doesn't have a particularly critical item within it to fulfill its function. How do we engage with that? And the guidance document here is very helpful in terms of grappling some of those definitions. We touched on some of the other items that fall within the Machinery Directive, things like safety components, lifting accessories. This is a fantastic document and is regularly open on my computer, helping you navigate various definitions and various other pieces within the Machinery Directive guide. And I'm sure I'll probably create a video delving into some of the other aspects that are contained within the guide as well, and hopefully that'll be helpful.